At first it looks simpler, tiny cub, weak and fragile, refusing to do what every leopard is born to do. But the reason it stays frozen at the bottom isn't weakness. It's something darker. A caretaker senses the truth, but no one believes. The powerful men in charge want silence, not questions. Then, one night, she discovers signs that should never exist inside a sanctuary. Claw marks too large for any cub, shadows that don't belong. And suddenly, the cub's strange behavior is no longer a mystery, it's a warning. She is forced to choose. Stay silent and safe or risk everything to uncover what's been hidden. Because behind the fences lies a secret worth killing for. So why does this cub refuse to climb? And when the truth finally comes out, will it set them free or destroy everything? Before we dive in, say hello in the comments. I love knowing where these stories are. Finding a home, the morning sun cast long shadows across the northern California wilderness as Clara Whitlock made her rounds at the wildlife sanctuary. Her weathered boots crunched on the gravel path between enclosures, the familiar sounds and scents of the animals filling the crisp air. She adjusted her practical work jacket, running a hand through her dark hair that was already escaping its ponytail despite the early hour. The sanctuary wasn't much to look at, just a collection of worn buildings and enclosures scattered across the rugged landscape. Budget cuts had left their mark in the form of patches on fencing and makeshift repairs. But to Clara, it was home, even if some of her coworkers treated her more like an unwelcome guest. As she approached the main office building, she heard Martin Heller's voice carrying through the open window. Her boss was on the phone, his tone smooth and practiced as he spoke to what seemed to be another potential donor. Of course, we provide the highest standard of care, he was saying. Our expertise is unmatched in the region. Clara tried not to let his words sting. Just yesterday, he'd dismissed her concerns about one of the recovering eagles, saying, "Leave the real assessments to those with actual credentials." Clara, the memory made her shoulders tense. She might not have fancy degrees hanging on her wall, but she knew animals. Growing up on her father's failed ranch had taught her more about reading creatures than any classroom could. Still, that background was exactly why others here looked down on her, the daughter of a failed rancher, trying to play wildlife expert. Her thoughts were interrupted by sudden activity at the sanctuary's entrance. A truck was pulling in, and, even from a distance, Clara could tell this wasn't a routine delivery. Her heart quickened as she recognized the wildlife enforcement vehicle. "We've got a live one," called out Pete, one of the enforcement officers, as Clara jogged over, confiscated from smugglers at the state border. Leopard cub, maybe 4 months old. Clara's breath caught as they carefully unloaded a small transport cage. Inside, pressed against the back corner, was a spotted leopard cub. The poor thing looked exhausted and frightened, but what struck Clara most was the alertness in its eyes. Despite its obvious fatigue, it was taking in everything around it. Martin appeared beside her. Suddenly all professional concern. "Get it set up in the new enclosure," he ordered. "The one with the climbing tree. Standard protocol." Clara helped transfer the cub to its temporary home, her experienced eyes noting every detail. The cub was thin, but not dangerously so. Its coat, while a bit dull, showed no signs of serious neglect. Something about this didn't add up to the usual smuggling case. Over the next few days, Clara spent every spare moment observing the cub. While it ate well and showed normal activity levels, one behavior stood out like a glaring warning sign. It wouldn't climb the tree, not even once. "It's probably just weak from the ordeal," one of her coworkers said with a dismissive wave when she pointed it out. "Give it time," said another. "It'll climb when it's ready." But Clara knew better. Leopard cubs were natural climbers from just a few weeks old. It was as instinctive to them as breathing. This cub would approach the tree, circle it, even place its paws on the trunk, but never climb. When she tried to discuss it with Martin, he cut her off mid-sentence. "Ms. Whitlock," he said, his voice carrying that familiar, condescending edge. "Perhaps you should focus on your actual duties instead of inventing problems. The cub is fine." But standing there now, watching the little leopard pace near the tree yet again, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The cub's behavior wasn't showing weakness, it was showing resistance. Like it knew something they didn't. She pressed her hand against the enclosure fence, and the cub paused, meeting her eyes. In that moment, Clara felt a connection with the small creature. They were both underestimated, both trying to communicate something that others refused to hear. "I'll figure this out," she whispered to the cub. "I promise." The leopard cub blinked slowly, then turned away from the tree once. Again, its silent refusal, speaking volumes to Clara's experienced eyes. Others might dismiss it as nothing, but Clara knew this was just the beginning of a mystery that needed to be unraveled, no matter what her colleagues thought of her theories. As he strode away, Clara turned her attention to the arriving leopard cub. Within the hour, a small transport cage arrived, carrying a frail spotted form. Clara's heart ached at the sight of the young leopard, its ribs visible beneath its dull coat. With gentle movements, she helped transfer it to the prepared enclosure. Throughout the day, Clara observed the cub with growing concern. Despite having a perfect climbing tree, specially selected and positioned, the young leopard refused to venture up its trunk. Even when Clara placed food on the lower branches, The cub only paced anxiously at the base. "Mr. Heller," Clara called out later that afternoon, catching her boss as he headed toward his office. "There's something wrong with the cub. Leopards instinctively climb, especially when stressed. This behavior isn't normal." Heller's face tightened with irritation. "Ms. Whitlock, not every animal follows your backyard theories. The cub is simply weak from its ordeal. But sir, this goes beyond weakness. The way it keeps looking up at the tree, there's trauma there. Something happened to make it fear climbing." Clara pressed on, her suntanned hands gesturing earnestly. "We need to investigate its background more thoroughly." "Enough." Heller's voice cut like a whip. "We have investors arriving next week, and I need this sanctuary looking perfect. That means healthy, normal animals doing what they're supposed to do. Your job is to feed that cub and get it presentation ready, not play amateur psychologist." Clara felt the familiar sting of dismissal, her cheeks burning. "With all due respect, sir, if we ignore signs of trauma, Heller's laugh was cold. "You couldn't even finish community college. Ms. Whitlock, leave the behavioral analysis. Two qualified professionals. Now, I suggest you focus on your actual duties before I find someone who will." The threat hung in the air as he turned and walked away, leaving Clara standing alone in the fading afternoon light. Her throat felt tight with frustrated tears, but she swallowed them back. Her father's failed ranch might have cut her education short, but she knew animals. She knew their hearts. As evening settled over the sanctuary, Clara couldn't shake her unease about the cub. After finishing her final rounds, she grabbed a flashlight and headed back to the leopard enclosure. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the cub curled up in its shelter. As far from the tree as possible, Clara swept the light upward, examining the tree more closely. Her breath caught in her throat. There, high up on the trunk, were deep claw marks, far too high for the small cub to have made them. The scratches were wider, more powerful, the marks of an adult leopard. Her hand trembled slightly as she traced the beam along the bark, revealing more marks. These weren't from random testing or play. They showed signs of desperation, of an animal trying to climb down rather than up. The pattern told a story of struggle. The cub whimpered softly from its corner, and Clara's heart clenched with sudden understanding. This cub hadn't arrived alone. Somewhere out there was its mother, and the cub's fear of climbing wasn't weakness at all. It was memory. Clara clicked off the flashlight, her mind racing. The smuggling operation that had brought in the cub must have been larger than anyone had said. But why would Heller be so quick to dismiss her concerns? Why was he so focused on appearances for the investors rather than the animal's well-being? The night air felt colder as Clara made her way back to her small on-site cabin. She'd learned long ago to trust her instincts with animals, even when others doubted her. Those claw marks told a truth someone didn't want found, and the frightened cub was the key to uncovering it. Inside her cabin, Clara pulled out her worn notebook and began documenting everything she'd observed. The cub's behavior, the claw marks, Heller's unusual reactions. Something was very wrong at the sanctuary she'd devoted herself to, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the small leopard cub, huddled alone in its enclosure, was just the beginning of a much darker secret. The next few days blurred together as Clara divided her time between her regular duties and watching over the leopard cub. She noticed its eating patterns were irregular. Some days it would barely touch its food. Other times it would eat ravenously, as if storing energy for something. But what troubled her most was how it would sit for hours, staring into the distance beyond the sanctuary's main grounds. One particularly humid afternoon, while replacing the cub's water, Clara heard something that made her freeze, a deep rumbling sound carried on the wind. It was so faint, she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it, but the cub's reaction told her otherwise. Its ears perked up, and for the first time since arriving, it moved with purpose toward the eastern fence of its enclosure. "What do you hear, little one?" Clara whispered, watching as the cub pressed against the fence, its small body tense with attention. The sound came again, definitely a big cat's call, but not from any of their known residents. Clara checked her watch. 3:30 in the afternoon. Most staff would be in their afternoon meetings or handling paperwork. Perfect timing for a little investigation. Following the direction of the sound, Clara made her way past the marked trails and official enclosures. The terrain grew rougher, with thick brush and fallen logs making each step challenging. She'd never ventured this far into the property before. There was supposed to be nothing but storage sheds and maintenance equipment back here. The cub's strange behavior kept playing in her mind. Its refusal to climb, those longing stares, the way it would perk up at certain times of day. Clara's heart began to race as a terrible suspicion took root. That after 20 minutes of careful navigation through the undergrowth, she heard it again, closer this time, a low rumbling growl that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Clara crouched behind a large boulder, peering around its edge. There, partially hidden by strategic placement of storage containers and overgrown vegetation, stood a chain-link enclosure she'd never seen before. It was crude compared to the sanctuary's official habitats. No enrichment items, minimal shelter, just bare necessities to keep an animal alive, and inside, pacing with fluid grace despite signs of malnourishment, was an adult female leopard. Clara's hand flew to her mouth to stifle her gasp. The big cat was magnificent, even in her compromised state. Powerful muscles moving beneath her spotted coat. Eyes alert and intelligent. But what struck Clara most were the scars visible on her flanks and the way she favored her right front paw. Oh my God, Clara breathed, her mind racing to connect the dots. This had to be the cub's mother, the one supposedly lost to poachers. Instead, she'd been here all along, hidden away in this secret pen while her cub was displayed to visitors as a rescue success story. The mother leopard suddenly stopped pacing and turned her head directly toward Clara's hiding spot. Those amber eyes held none of the fear her cub showed, only a fierce intelligence and determination that Clara recognized all too well. This wasn't a broken animal. This was a mother who hadn't given up. Watching the leopard's movements, Clara noticed how she would occasionally leap partway up the walls of her enclosure, testing for weaknesses. The pattern of movement was identical to the claw marks she'd found on the tree in the cub's enclosure. The cub wasn't refusing to climb out of weakness or trauma, it was refusing out of solidarity, an instinctive protest against the place where its mother was imprisoned. Clara felt tears rolling down her cheeks as the truth hit her full force. The sanctuary, her sanctuary, wasn't just housing rescued animals. Someone was using it as a cover for something much darker. And Heller's insistence on appearances, his sharp dismissal of her concerns, it all made horrible sense now. The mother leopard made that rumbling sound again, and Clara could hear the longing in it, a call to her cub that had to cross hundreds of yards and multiple barriers. Yet still, the cub responded, as Clara had witnessed. Their bond remained unbroken despite everything that had been done to separate them. Clara wiped her eyes with trembling hands. The discovery left her feeling hollow and sick, but also filled with a new sense of purpose. These magnificent creatures didn't just need care, they needed justice. And somehow, despite her lack of credentials or authority, she would have to find a way to expose the truth and reunite this family. The mother leopard made one more circuit of her prison before disappearing into the crude shelter. Clara carefully backed away, marking the location in her mind and taking note of landmarks that would help her find her way back. Each step away from that hidden pen felt like a betrayal, but she knew she couldn't help either leopard without a proper plan as she made her way back to the main sanctuary grounds. Clara's mind was already racing with possibilities and dangers. She had discovered the truth, but now came the harder part, deciding what to do with it. Clara's hands trembled as she marched toward Heller's office, her heart pounding against her ribs. The morning sun streamed through the sanctuary's windows, but she felt cold inside. She had spent the night tossing and turning, the image of the imprisoned mother leopard haunting her dreams. Without knocking, she pushed open Heller's door. He sat behind his expensive desk, looking pristine in his tailored suit despite the early hour. "Miss Whitlock," he said smoothly, "this is unexpected. How could you?" Clara's voice shook with anger. "I found her, the mother leopard, hidden away in that old pen behind the north ridge." Heller's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He slowly placed his pen down and leaned back in his chair. Clara, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Always letting your imagination run wild. This is exactly why proper credentials matter in our field. Don't patronize me," Clara shot back. "I saw her with my own eyes. She's malnourished, scared, and separated from her cub. What kind of sanctuary does this to animals?" Heller's friendly mask slipped away. His face hardened as he stood up, towering over his desk. "Let me remind you of something, Miss Whitlock. You're here because I took pity on you after your family's unfortunate situation." His lips curved into a cruel smile. "How much did your father lose when that ranch went under?" "Everything, wasn't it?" Clara flinched as if he'd struck her. Old shame burned in her chest, memories of auction signs, her father's defeated face, their family home sold to cover debts. "And let's not forget," Heller continued, circling his desk to stand closer, "you lack the formal education that everyone else here has earned. No degree, no certifications, just what you call instinct. Do you know how that looks to our investors?" Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "This isn't about me," she insisted. "It's about that leopard and her cub." "No, Clara, this is very much about you." Heller's voice turned ice cold. "About your tendency to create problems where none exist. I suggest you focus on your assigned duties and leave the bigger picture to those qualified to handle it. Consider this a friendly warning." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Clara backed toward the door, her confidence crumbling under the weight of his words. Everything he'd said about her past, her lack of credentials, they were the same. Doubts that haunted her sleepless nights. She fled the office, barely making it outside before the tears started falling. Her feet carried her automatically to the maintenance shed where Jonas usually worked on equipment. She needed to tell someone who might believe her. Jonas was there, fixing a broken generator. He looked up as she entered, his weathered face immediately creasing with concern. "Clara, what's wrong?" The whole story spilled out between sobs. Finding the mother leopard, confronting Heller, his cruel dismissal. Jonas listened quietly, his strong hands stilling on his tools. "He's right about everything," Clara finished miserably. I don't have the education everyone else has. Maybe I am just seeing things that aren't there. Jonas set down his wrench with deliberate care. Remember 3 years ago, when I got lost in that storm? His voice was steady, grounding. Every qualified expert said I must have gone north. But you insisted I would have headed east, toward the river. You said you could feel it? Clara nodded, remembering that frantic search. Your instinct saved my life that day, Jonas continued. Found me half frozen in exactly the spot you said. That's not something you learn in books, Clara. That's something you're born with. He stepped closer, putting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Your father's ranch failing wasn't your fault, and not having a degree doesn't make your knowledge any less real. If you say there's something wrong with that leopard situation, I believe you. Fresh tears fell, but these were different tears of relief at being finally, truly heard. Jonas' quiet confidence in her helped steady her shaking hands. Heller can wave around all the credentials he wants, Jonas said firmly, but I trust your instincts over his fancy degree any day. Whatever's going on with that leopard and her cub, we'll figure it out together. Clara wiped her eyes, drawing strength from his unwavering support. The shame and self-doubt Heller had stirred up began to recede, replaced by determination. She might lack official credentials, but she knew in her heart what she'd seen was real. And now, she wasn't facing it alone. Clara's hands trembled as she pressed her ear against the thin wall of Heller's office. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the sanctuary's windows, but she remained hidden in the darkened hallway. Inside, Heller's voice carried clearly. As he spoke on the phone, yes, the mother leopard is exactly as promised. Healthy enough for transport, despite the conditions we've kept her in. Heller's tone was smooth, businesslike. The buyer in Dubai is prepared to pay full price. We'll move her next week, before anyone catches wind. Clara's stomach clenched. Her fingers dug into the rough wall as she listened, each word hitting her like a physical blow. The cub, Heller continued. We'll keep it here as planned. Perfect. Showcase animal for the sanctuary's public face. Donors eat up the rescue story. Unable to listen anymore, Clara backed away silently, her mind racing. She hurried through the sanctuary's winding paths until she reached the maintenance shed where Jonas was organizing equipment. The moment she burst through the door, he looked up, reading the distress on her face. They're selling her. Clara's voice cracked. The mother? They're shipping her overseas next week. The cub will never see her again. Jonas set down the rope. He'd been coiling and stepped closer, his weathered face creased with concern. You're sure about this? I heard him on the phone. Some buyer in Dubai. Clara ran her fingers through her hair, pacing the small space. The cub's just a prop to him. Something to show off while they profit from selling exotic animals. Jonas watched her move, his steady presence anchoring her spiraling thoughts. What do you want to do about it? Clara stopped pacing and met his eyes. We have to get her out, both of them, but I don't even know where to start. Then let's figure it out. Jonas moved to the workbench, clearing a space. We've got some advantages. I know the layout of this place better than most, and you understand these animals. Clara joined him. At the bench, hope flickering to life. We'd need tranquilizers for safe transport, and something to contain them during movement. I can get access to the medical supplies, Jonas said, sketching a rough map of the sanctuary grounds. And there's the old transport cage and storage. It needs work, but it's solid. We'll need ropes too, Clara added, her mind starting to form a plan for securing everything, maybe creating barriers if needed. They spent the next hour plotting, marking escape routes and timing windows. The risks were enormous. They could lose their jobs, face criminal charges, or worse. But every time Clara's courage wavered, she thought of the cub, refusing to climb that tree in silent protest of its mother's absence. The biggest challenge will be timing, Jonas said, pointing to the guard rotation schedule he'd drawn. We'll have maybe 30 minutes between night shifts to move them both. Clara nodded, memorizing the details. The mother will be the hardest part. She's been traumatized, trapped in that hidden pen. We'll need to be incredibly careful. Are you sure about this? Jonas asked quietly. Once we start, there's no going back. Clara thought about everything she could lose. Her career, her freedom, her future. Then she thought about the mother leopard, waiting in darkness, and her cub, alone in an enclosure that might as well be a prison. I've never been more sure, she said firmly. These animals deserve freedom, and what Heller's doing is wrong. Simple as that. Jonas smiled slightly, recognition in his eyes. Then we'll need every tool we can get our hands on. I'll start gathering supplies tonight. Tranquilizers, ropes, basic medical kit, in case anything goes wrong. Clara felt a surge of gratitude for his unwavering support. Thank you, Jonas. I couldn't do this alone. You don't have to, he replied simply. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules, and sometimes you need a partner in crime. They spent another hour refining their plan, accounting for every variable they could think of. The weight of what they were about to attempt hung heavy in the air, but Clara felt stronger for having made the decision. No matter what came next, she knew this was the path she had to take. As the sun began to set outside the shed windows, Clara gathered the notes they'd made, committing each detail to memory before destroying the evidence. The mother leopard had survived months of captivity, holding on despite everything. Now it was time to bring her back to her cub, whatever the cost. Tomorrow night, Clara said firmly, we'll need the cover of darkness, and every second counts before they move her. Jonas nodded, his expression determined. Tomorrow night, I'll have everything ready. They parted ways, each heading off to make their preparations. Clara's heart was racing, but her steps were steady. For the first time since discovering the truth about the sanctuary, she felt truly aligned with her purpose. The path ahead was dangerous, but the alternative, doing nothing, was unthinkable. The night air hung thick with tension as Clara and Jonas crouched behind the storage shed, their hearts pounding. The full moon cast enough light to see by, but also meant they could be easily spotted. Clara clutched the tranquilizer gun close to her chest, its weight both reassuring and terrifying. 2 guards, Jonas whispered, his breath warm against her ear. They're making rounds every 15 minutes. Clara nodded, watching the uniformed men pass by the hidden pen where the mother leopard was being held. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness in sweeping arcs. These weren't regular sanctuary staff, they were private security, hired by Heller. We wait for them to split up, she murmured. Her palms were sweaty against the tranquilizer gun, but her grip remained steady. Years of handling rescue animals had taught her patience. The guards separated at the corner of the compound, just as Jonas had predicted. One headed toward the main building while the other continued along the perimeter fence. Clara caught Jonas's eye and nodded. It was time. They moved silently through the shadows, Jonas taking point. The remaining guard never saw them coming. The tranquilizer dart found its mark in his shoulder, and he crumpled without a sound. Jonas caught him before he hit the ground, dragging him behind some bushes. Quick, Clara urged, rushing to the pen's heavy padlock. Her hands shook as she fitted the key she'd copied from Heller's office. The lock clicked open, and she eased the gate inward. Inside, yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness. The mother leopard lay in the corner, her powerful frame diminished by captivity but still magnificent. Clara's heart ached at the sight of her ribs showing through her spotted coat. Easy now, Clara soothed, preparing another tranquilizer dose. We're getting you out of here. The big cat watched him warily but didn't move as Clara's dart found its mark. They waited tensely as the sedative took effect, Jonas keeping watch, while Clara monitored the leopard's breathing. She's ready, Clara finally said. Help me get her on the stretcher. They had just secured the unconscious leopard when a shout rang out across the compound. The second guard had returned early. Hey, stop right there. Flashlight beams suddenly flooded their position. Clara's blood ran cold as she heard running footsteps and the crackle of radio static. Move, Jonas urged, grabbing one end of the stretcher. Clara seized the other and they hurried toward the sanctuary's veterinary building where they'd prepared a temporary holding space. The guard's radio squawked behind them. Intruders at the back pen. Need backup immediately. They barely made it 20 yards before floodlights blazed to life, bathing the entire compound in harsh white light. Clara squinted against the glare, her muscles straining under the stretchers. Wait, well, Martin Heller's voice cut through the night like a knife. I had a feeling you might try something foolish. Clara? He emerged from behind the veterinary building, blocking their path. 2 more guards flanked him, their hands hovering near their weapons. That animal is worth more than you'll make it. 10 years, Heller said coldly. Put her down and maybe we can discuss this rationally. Clara's mind raced. They couldn't go forward, and the way back was blocked by the pursuing guard. Jonas shifted beside her, tensing for action. There's nothing rational about what you're doing, Clara shot back, playing for time as she assessed their options, selling endangered animals to private collectors. How long have you been running this operation? Heller's face hardened. Longer than you've been here, and with the full support of people far more powerful than you can imagine. Did you really think you could stop it with one amateur rescue attempt? Maybe not, Jonas spoke up, his voice steady. But we can expose it, Kanya? Heller smiled without warmth. Who would believe the word of a failed rancher's daughter and a backwoods tracker against a respected conservationist? Clara's grip tightened on the stretcher as anger flared in her chest. But before anyone could move, a low growl rumbled through the night air. The sedated leopard was starting to stir. The tranquilizer was wearing off faster than expected. The momentary distraction was all they needed. Jonas suddenly swung his end of the stretcher, forcing Clara to pivot with him. They ducked around the corner of the building just as shouts erupted behind them. Don't let them reach the tree line, Heller bellowed. They ran, weaving between buildings with their precious cargo. The mother leopard was fully awake now, struggling against her restraints. Clara's muscles burned, but she pushed through the pain. The back gate, Jonas panted. It's our only chance. Behind them, boots pounded on packed earth and radios crackled with urgent commands. Clara could hear the rising panic in the guards' voices. They knew what would happen if a sedated leopard got loose on the grounds. As they rounded the final corner toward their escape route, Clara realized with growing horror that this was bigger than just one corrupt sanctuary manager. The scale of Heller's operation, his confidence and his powerful connections, they'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than they'd imagined. They pressed on through the darkness. The mother leopard's growls growing stronger with each passing moment. Whatever came next, Clara knew there was no turning back. They'd crossed the line tonight, and nothing would ever be the same. The night air hung thick with tension as Clara and Jonas crouched behind the storage shed, their hearts pounding. The tranquilized guards lay motionless near the mother leopards, holding pen, their forms dark against the moonlit ground. The freed leopard had already disappeared into the sanctuary's dense forest area, her powerful form melting into the shadows like water. "We need to get out of here," Jonas whispered, touching Clara's arm, "before anyone notices." But Clara couldn't move. Her eyes had caught something through the small window of the storage shed, stacks of wooden crates with air holes. Foreign shipping labels covered their sides. Her stomach turned as she pieced it together. "Wait," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "There's something else." Despite Jonas's worried look, Clara edged toward the shed's door. The lock was simple. She'd used it hundreds of times during her daily duties. Her trembling fingers found the key on her ring, and the door creaked open. The interior hit her with a wall of musty air, and quiet sounds rustling, breathing. Living creatures in those boxes. Clara fumbled for the light switch, and harsh fluorescent lighting revealed the truth she'd been blind to for so long. Dozens of crates lined the walls, each marked with shipping dates and destinations. Some rattled with movement, others were eerily still. Clara moved closer, her heart in her throat, and peered through an air hole. A pair of frightened eyes stared back, a juvenile clouded leopard, a species she knew was critically endangered. "Oh, my God," she whispered. "Jonas, look at these manifests." Jonas stepped in, his weathered face growing hard as he examined the shipping documents tacked to the wall. "Singapore, Dubai, private collectors. These aren't conservation transfers. They're sales records." Clara's hand shook as she leafed through the papers. "The sanctuary, it's all been a front. The rehabilitation program, the public displays, the fundraising, it's just cover for smuggling." Her voice cracked. "We've been helping him do this. All this time, I've been helping him." The weight of it crushed her chest. Every animal she'd helped rehabilitate that had been quietly moved to another facility, had they all ended up in private collections? How many had she unknowingly handed over to this terrible fate? Jonas gripped her shoulder. "This isn't your fault, but we need to." The sound of approaching vehicles cut him off. Headlights swept across the windows, and engines growled in the darkness. "Heller," Clara breathed. He must have been alerted about the guards. They ducked deeper into the shed, among the crates. Clara's mind raced. The mother leopard was free, but these other animals, she couldn't leave them. Not now that she knew. Voices approached Heller's commanding tone, rising above others. "Search every building. They have to be here somewhere. And find that leopard." Clara and Jonas pressed themselves against the back wall as footsteps crunched on gravel outside. The door handle rattled. "Sir," someone called from a distance. "The tranquilized guards are coming around." The footsteps moved away, but Clara knew it was only temporary. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she looked at Jonas in the dim light. "This is bigger than just one rescue now," she whispered. "We have to expose all of it." Jonas nodded grimly. "But first we have to survive the night. Heller won't let this evidence get out." Clara pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, quickly photographing the shipping manifests and the crates. Each click of the camera felt like documenting a nightmare she'd been living in without knowing. The sanctuary's pristine reputation, the glowing media coverage, the wealthy donors, it had all been carefully crafted cover for this underground operation. More voices outside, closer now. Clara and Jonas crouched lower, and she fought to control her breathing. The magnitude of what they'd discovered pressed down on her like a physical weight. This wasn't just about saving one leopard and her cub anymore. This was about exposing a massive criminal operation that had been hiding in plain sight, dressed up as conservation. Through the window, she could see Heller's silhouette moving between the buildings, directing his men with sharp gestures. His polished exterior had cracked, revealing the ruthless predator beneath. The man who had belittled her, dismissed her concerns, and tried to make her doubt herself had been protecting this dark secret all along. "We need a plan," Jonas whispered. "We're trapped in here, and they'll find us soon." Clara nodded, her mind racing. The evidence was on her phone now, but they had to get it out, had to survive to expose the truth. The animals in the crates around them shuffled and whimpered softly, unknowing witnesses to the human drama unfolding in their prison. The footsteps returned, and this time, they weren't moving away. Clara held her breath as the door handle turned. Slowly, metal scraping against metal in the quiet night. Lightning split the sky as Clara raced through the sanctuary grounds, rain pelting her face like tiny needles. Her boots squelched in the mud as she darted between buildings, desperately searching for a way out. The administrative building's lights blazed behind her, papers scattered everywhere from their hasty search through Heller's records. What they'd discovered had turned her blood to ice. Shipping manifests, falsified documents, proof of dozens of endangered animals sold to private collectors. Thunder rolled overhead as Clara spotted movement in her peripheral vision. Heller emerged from the darkness, his usually pristine suit now drenched and disheveled, his face twisted with fury as he leveled a tranquilizer gun at her. "You should have stayed in your lane, Clara," he snarled, his voice barely carrying over the storm. "Taking care of the weak ones. Cleaning cages, that was your place." Clara backed away, her heart hammering. She glanced around frantically, realizing, with growing horror, that he'd herded her toward the main leopard enclosure. The heavy metal gate loomed behind her, and she could hear restless movement inside. "You're done, Heller," she shot back, trying to keep her voice steady. "We found everything. The shipping records, the fake permits. Found them?" Heller's laugh was cold and sharp. "Oh no, Clara, I left them for you to find. I needed you here, alone." He reached for something in his pocket, a remote control. With a metallic clang, the enclosure gate began to slide open behind her. Clara spun around, her breath catching in her throat. Inside, she could make out a large shape moving in the shadows, one of the adult leopards, its movements sluggish and uncoordinated. Half sedated, Heller explained with cruel satisfaction. Just enough drugs to make it unstable, unpredictable. Perfect for a tragic accident during a storm. Clara's mind raced. The leopard was struggling to its feet, confused and aggressive. She could hear its labored breathing, see the unnatural way it swayed. Her instincts screamed that this was wrong. The animal was suffering, dangerous in its disorientation. Rain streamed down her face as she slowly backed into the enclosure. Better the leopard than Heller with that gun, she reasoned. At least with the animal, she had a chance. "Your expertise with difficult cases ends tonight," Heller called after her, his voice dripping with mockery. "Such a shame, killed by the very creatures you championed." The gate clanged shut behind her. Clara pressed herself against the wet concrete wall, her eyes locked on the leopard. It was Max, she realized, one of their resident males, usually calm and dignified. Now his eyes were glazed, pupils blown wide from the drugs. He let out a low growl that made her skin prickle. "Easy, Max," she murmured, keeping her voice soft and steady despite her terror. "I know you're scared. I know everything feels wrong right now." The big cat took an unsteady step forward, muscles rippling under his spotted coat. Clara could see how the sedatives were affecting him. His usual fluid grace replaced by jerky movements, his balance compromised. That made him even more dangerous. Lightning flashed again, momentarily illuminating the entire enclosure. Max flinched at the bright light, letting out a snarl. Clara remained still, forcing herself to breathe. Slowly, evenly. She remembered what she'd learned over years of working with injured and traumatized animals. Fear fed fear. Panic would only escalate the situation. "You're not yourself right now," she continued in that same calm tone, even as rain soaked through. Her clothes and thunder crashed overhead. "But I know you're in there, Max. I know you. I know you." The leopard swayed closer, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. Clara kept talking, her voice becoming a steady anchor in the chaos of the storm. She remembered all the mornings she'd fed him, the careful trust they'd built. Even through the drug-induced haze, something in him might remember too. "That's it," she encouraged as Max paused, his aggressive posture softening slightly. "You know me. You know I've never hurt you." A sudden shout from outside made them both jump. Clara heard sounds of a scuffle, then Jonas's voice rising above. "The storm, drop it, Heller, it's over." Max tensed again, but Clara held her ground. "Focus on me," she said firmly. "Just me. We're going to get through this together." The leopard took another step, then another. He was close enough now that Clara could feel his breath. Her heart thundered in her chest, but she didn't move. Instead, she slowly sank into a crouch, making herself smaller, less threatening. "That's right," she whispered. "You're safe with me. Always safe with me." Max swayed one final time, then slowly lowered himself to the wet ground beside her. His big head dropped onto his paws as the drugs pulled him toward unconsciousness. Clara remained perfectly still, maintaining that bubble of calm she'd created, even as she heard the enclosure gate opening behind her. Clara Jonas's voice, urgent but controlled. "Don't move. We've got Heller secured. I'm coming to you." "Careful," she called back softly. "Max is sedated but unstable. We need a medical team." She stayed with the leopard until help arrived, her hand resting lightly on his heaving side, monitoring his breathing. Even through her exhaustion and lingering fear, she felt a fierce pride. Her instincts, the very thing Heller had mocked, had saved her life tonight. Clara's hands trembled as she sorted through the damning documents spread across her tiny office desk. Shipping manifests, wire transfers, photos of exotic animals. In hidden pens, the evidence against Martin Heller was overwhelming. Outside, the storm that had nearly claimed her life the night before had passed, leaving behind a crystal-clear morning that seemed to mirror the clarity of purpose in her heart. "Are you sure about this?" Jonas asked, his usually steady voice carrying a note of concern. He stood by the window, watching the first cars of arriving investors roll up the sanctuary's main drive. "I've never been more sure of anything," Clara replied, gathering the papers into a folder. Her hands still bore scratches from last night's encounter in the leopard enclosure, but they were badges of courage now, not shame. "Those investors need to see the truth. She glanced at her watch. 8:30 in the morning. The sanctuary's quarterly investor meeting would begin in 30 minutes. Heller had no idea she'd survived his attempt to silence her, believing she'd fled after the incident. The element of surprise was on her side. Through the window she could see staff members directing cars toward the parking area. Men and women in expensive suits emerged, chatting among themselves, unaware of the revelation that awaited them. Clara's heart pounded, but her resolve remained firm. The mother leopard, she asked Jonas. Safe in the enclosure, just as we planned. No one's noticed her yet. They all think it's just the cub in there. Jonas adjusted his worn leather jacket. I'll be right behind you the whole time. Clara nodded, grateful for his steady presence. She gathered her evidence and straightened her shirt, practical field clothes, not the polished attire of the arriving investors. But today, that difference felt like strength rather than weakness. They made their way to the sanctuary's main conference room, where rows of chairs faced a podium. The space filled quickly with investors, board members, and local media invited to cover the sanctuary's supposed conservation successes. Clara took a seat in the back, folder clutched tightly. In her lap. Martin Heller strode to the podium, impeccable in his tailored suit. If he was surprised to see Clara, he didn't show it. His practiced smile never wavered as he began his presentation about the sanctuary's achievements. Ladies and gentlemen, Heller announced, his voice smooth as silk, I'm proud to report another successful quarter for our wildlife conservation efforts. Clara waited, letting him build his house of lies. The projector clicked through slides showing healthy animals, gleaming facilities, and upward trending graphs. Perfect lies, wrapped in polished presentation. When Heller opened the floor for questions, Clara stood. The folder felt heavy in her hands, the weight of truth ready to shatter illusions. I have something the investors need to see, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. Heads turned, and Heller's smile froze. Ms. Whitlock, this isn't the appropriate time, he began, but Clara was already moving forward. These are shipping manifests, she announced, holding up documents as she walked to the front. Proof that this sanctuary isn't saving animals, it's selling them. Endangered species trafficked to private collectors, while we display a few showcase animals to maintain the lie. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara connected her phone to the projector, and photos she'd taken of the hidden pens filled the screen. This is where the real business happens, she continued, away from public views and investor tours. Heller's facade cracked. Security, he barked, but Jonas stepped forward, blocking the door. The authorities have already been notified, Jonas called out. They're on their way with warrants. Clara turned to the stunned audience. But don't take my word for it. I can show you proof right now. She gestured toward the windows overlooking the leopard enclosure. That cub, we've claimed, was rescued from smugglers. Watch. The investors crowded the windows. In the enclosure below, the morning sun illuminated a scene that made gasps ripple through the crowd. The mother leopard stood proud and free, her spotted coat gleaming. The cub, which had refused to climb for weeks, now bounded toward the tree. That cub wasn't weak, Clara explained, her voice strong with conviction. It was protesting, refusing to pretend everything was fine while its mother suffered in a hidden cage, waiting to be sold. They watched as the cub reached the tree. In one fluid motion, it leaped, climbing with natural grace to join its mother on a high branch. The two leopards touched noses, their reunion now complete in the light of day. The cub's weakness was, actually, strength, Clara said softly. The strength to resist what it knew was wrong, to wait for truth to come out. Chaos erupted as police vehicles pulled up outside, lights flashing. Heller lunged for the door, but Jonas was faster, restraining him until authorities entered. The investors demanded answers, the media scrambled for statements, but Clara's attention remained on the leopards in the tree, mother and cub together. Symbols of truth finally unveiled. What had started with a cub's refusal to climb had exposed a network of corruption and cruelty. As she watched Heller being led away in handcuffs, Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Like the cub, she had trusted her instincts, refused to accept comfortable lies, and fought for truth to prevail. The investors gathered in neat rows of chairs, their expressions shifting from polite interest to shock as Clara methodically presented her evidence. Martin Heller's face grew increasingly pale as she revealed photograph after photograph, document after document. When she finished speaking, the room erupted in angry murmurs. This sanctuary isn't protecting animals, Clara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. It's trafficking them, and I can prove it. As if on cue, Jonas entered with two federal wildlife officers. They approached Heller, who seemed to shrink in his expensive suit. The click of handcuffs echoed through the suddenly silent room. Martin Heller, one officer announced, you're under arrest for wildlife trafficking and endangered species violations. Clara watched as they led Heller away, his usual swagger replaced by defeated shuffling steps. She felt no joy in his downfall, only relief that the animals would finally be safe. Outside, more law enforcement vehicles arrived. Teams began documenting the hidden facilities, cataloging evidence, and coordinating with international authorities to track down sold animals. The sanctuary's legitimate staff gathered in small groups. Processing the revelation that their workplace had been a front for criminal activity, Clara made her way to the leopard enclosure, Jonas following close behind. The morning sun painted the leaves golden, and a gentle breeze rustled through the branches. The mother leopard lay stretched along a thick limb, her coat gleaming with health after proper care. Below, the cub paced restlessly. "Watch," Clara whispered to Jonas, pointing to the cub. The small leopard approached the tree trunk, its spots dappled in the shifting sunlight. For weeks, it had refused to climb, its instincts telling it something was wrong. Now, with its mother free and present, the cub's natural behaviors emerged. It placed one paw on the bark, then another. In fluid movements, it scrambled up the trunk, joining its mother in the branches. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she watched them together. Jonas's hand found hers, warm and steady. "You did this?" he said softly. "You trusted your instincts when everyone else ignored them." Clara squeezed his hand, remembering all the moments of doubt, the harsh words from Heller, the years of being dismissed. "We did this," she corrected. "I couldn't have managed without your help." Over the next few hours, sanctuary board members approached Clara one by one, offering apologies and, more importantly, a new position. They wanted her to oversee the sanctuary's transformation into a legitimate rescue center. Her expertise in animal behavior, once questioned because of her lack of formal credentials, was now recognized as invaluable. "I don't need a fancy title," Clara told them. "I just want to make sure the animals are protected." As the day wound down, Clara and Jonas sat on a bench near the leopard enclosure, watching the mother and cub groom each other in their perch. The sanctuary would need extensive rebuilding physically and in reputation, but Clara felt ready for the challenge. "You know," Jonas said, his shoulder warm against hers, "I always knew you were special. From the day you found me in that ravine and knew exactly how to help." Clara smiled, remembering how she'd tracked him for hours after his climbing accident, refusing to give up when others thought it hopeless. "My instincts told me you were worth saving, and mine tell me I'm exactly where I need to be," he replied, his eyes meeting hers with warmth and certainty. Above them, the leopard cub playfully batted at a leaf while its mother watched protectively. The scene represented everything Clara had fought for, not just the animals' physical safety, but their right to live true to their nature. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing she had finally embraced her own nature too. She was no longer the underestimated caretaker, doubting her worth because she lacked formal credentials. She had become what she was always meant to be, a protector who understood that true strength often came wrapped in gentleness, and that the most powerful instincts were those that connected one heart to another. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Clara felt complete. She had Jonas's unwavering support, the satisfaction of knowing she'd made a real difference, and the joy of watching the leopards thrive in their sanctuary. She didn't need recognition or glory. The truth of who she was and what she could do was enough. The mother leopard's eyes met Clara's for a moment, and Clara saw in them a reflection of her own journey, from captivity to freedom, from fear to strength. Both of them had found their way home. If this ending felt like it was written for you, subscribe and join me tomorrow for another story that might feel the same.